Hello and welcome back to another episode of Pep Talk. Those of you who follow medical innovations and technology know that the laser used in laser vision correction, the excimer laser, was first developed in the early 1980s for use in the manufacturing of silicon chips. From there, it was hypothesized and theorized that it could be used to reshape the cornea on the eye and provide laser vision correction to patients and free them from glasses and contact lenses. With an entire body of work ahead of that, the very first laser vision correction treatment was performed in 1986. And I'm here today with Dr. Marguerite McDonald, the surgeon who did perform that down in New Orleans, Louisiana. Marguerite, so good to see you.
Great to see you, Sharif.
I'd like to say Dr. McDonald has quite an astonishing career in the field of ophthalmology. She's a past president of both the American Society of Cataract and Refractive Surgeons, as well as the International Society of Refractive Surgeons. She's published over 1,800 papers in the field and is well known by ophthalmologists, not only in the US, but around the world. But today we get to take a little tour back into that time. And, you know, I mentioned, Dr. McDonald, Marguerite, if I may, that it's been 25 years since that laser was approved to do photorefractive keratectomy, or what we know of as PRK. And you treated that very first patient. So kind of take us back to that time. What was it like being down at, was it LSU that you were at, correct?
Yes. So in 1983, Steve Trokel published his now classic paper in the AJO, where he took the solid state technology and the excimer laser that are used to make computer chips. And he fired the excimer laser at a series of cow cadaver eyes. And he said, look, there's no damage to surrounding tissue. Maybe this could be used for refractive surgery. So I was already a very young instructor, I think. Yeah, I wasn't even an assistant professor yet in Louisiana. And I called him up and I said, Dr. Trokel, do you remember me? I was a medical student at Columbia. You helped me with my retinal blastoma research. Listen, I know Columbia. You don't have any animals up there. The vivarium is tiny. You're going to need a lot of animals, lots of rabbits, lots of monkeys. I have them. So, would you like to work with me? And at that point, he had teamed up with Dr. Charles Munnerlyn, who is a brilliant physicist from California. So this is back before, electronic communications. The fax was brand new. Almost no one had one. So here's Charles Munnerlyn in California, Steve Trokel in New York, and me in New Orleans. And there was a lot of flying. And we did countless plastic discs. Then we moved on to cadaver eyes. Then we moved on to rabbits. The rabbits did not do too well. The rabbits had huge, thick, white scars for them. And it was very depressing. In 1 week, I lost my research coordinator and my cornea fellow who said they both said, this project is so depressing, we're out of here. So we made the intuitive leap that, nobody knew anything about this. So we just made the leap. What if we made the ablations smoother? Our ablations had big ditches, if you will. We had a diaphragm that closed in only 5 positions. And we would fire the laser at a rabbit across the room, by the way. And this little rabbit was anesthetized. We'd fire at the rabbit for a few seconds, hand crank the diaphragm smaller, shoot for a few more seconds, crank it, closed in 5 positions. So it was a very rough surface. So we just said, before we give up, let's try 40 steps instead of 5. So Charles automated the diaphragm to close in 40 steps instead of 5. And all of a sudden things started to get a whole lot better. And then we moved, when we figured out to bring the patient closer and made some other changes, we moved on to monkeys, and we did countless monkeys. And we were bringing the monkey data to the FDA. And, this was highly controversial. There were angry letters about all of this in the letter to the editor section of the best journals, and really, really famous doctors were castigating me in particular personally. The money that you have in your NIH grant should be used for diabetic retinopathy and glaucoma. What are you doing with this frivolous use of our taxpayer dollars? It was horrible. But we soldiered on, and we began showing our monkey data at meetings. And remember, here I was, a young female from a university in the deep South. So I had a lot of flack coming at me. And we just kept pushing, and we kept saying to the FDA, is that enough? No, go do a few hundred more monkeys. So we're doing monkeys. And we get a call from the oculoplastic service of LSU, and they said, we have a lady here who has a very healthy 20/20 eye. She's 62. We're about to do an excimeration for orbital cancer. She's going to lose this eye, and she volunteers to let someone experiment on her eye before it's removed. Do you want to take advantage of this? And we called the FDA, we explained the situation, we got permission to race her out to the primate center. So here's this poor woman. Even an excimeration had only a small chance of saving her life. So she's about to have a painful disfiguring procedure because it takes about 1/8 of your head out. But we take her out, lay her down under the laser out at the primate center, and we do the world's first PRK. So she was 20/20, and we did a 4.5 diopter myopic correction on her. So she's uncomfortable. We have blurred up her vision. And 11 days later, she had her excimeration. We watched her every single day. She healed perfectly. We got our 4.5 diopter correction. And of course, we got the specimen, the cornea, after the excimeration. Mm-hmm. Everything was perfection. So we sent it to the FDA, and they were impressed enough to let us start human clinical trials. I tell you, without Mrs. Cassidy, she let us use her name, we'd still be doing monkeys. I mean, we'd still be doing monkey research because it was such a controversial, crazy thing at the time to be firing a laser at otherwise healthy eyes that had only a refractive error.
Alberta Cassidy, I remember the name well, Marguerite. And by full disclosure to our viewers, I started working with Dr. McDonald when I joined the company that developed the laser used in laser eye surgery that was run by Charles Munnerlyn in those early years. Marguerite, amazing. If you think about what happened in 1986, and then a full decade later to get the laser approved for PRK. And I do remember some of those arrows being fired around, how dare you do surgery on a healthy cornea when glasses and contacts are just fine. But if you go from that point to today, 25 years later, how did it fulfill your expectations about what this technology could do if you kind of think over the course of time?
Well, it overfilled. And just to be factually correct, first PTK in 87, but Mrs. Cassidy was actually 88. And just to finish the Mrs. Cassidy story, she lost her battle with cancer. And, at that point, we'd been allowed to bring the excimer laser from the primate center across Lake Pontchartrain to the medical school in New Orleans. Everybody was afraid that toxic gases would leak out of the laser and kill everyone. So we were in a trailer outside. And we said, let us at least honor her by calling it the Alberta H. Cassidy Excimer Laser Center. And the school said, no, we only name things after rich people who've given us money. And we threw a fit. We said she gave us everything she could give us. Mm-hmm. So they let us name our humble trailer after Mrs. Cassidy. Then we did the blind eyes, and then we did the partially sighted eyes, and then we did the fully sighted eyes for myopia, then myopia with astigmatism, and then hyperopia, and hyperopia with astigmatism, and we were off to the races.
Incredible, incredible story. And, now today, well, after this now got approved, and then the military started using it under the guidance of Dr. Steve Schallhorn. And then I remember another military ophthalmologist standing up in a meeting and saying that the excimer laser and PRK and LASIK in particularly were the single biggest items of competitive advantage for warfighters, just being able to see extremely well without the use of glasses or contacts. How does that make you feel as a researcher?
Tremendous. I mean, the number one reason that soldiers in World War II were taken off the field of battle was broken glasses. I mean, if you are impaired, if your glasses or contacts are broken or lost, you're toast in the military. As of the end of 2020, according to Market Scope, 74.5 million procedures have been performed worldwide. And, you know, we knew we were going to help a lot of people. We had no idea it was going to turn into the watershed moment, the revolution that it did.
It's amazing. It's amazing. And, you know, I've got to imagine among the many accomplishments in your professional career, this would rank up there. If not the top one, it's certainly in the top few. But what's been most gratifying to you that you've worked on even out besides the laser and laser vision correction?
One thing that I worked on way back in medical school is right up there. When I was in medical school at Columbia in Manhattan, I knew I wanted to be in ophthalmology. So my first clinical rotation, where you get to choose what you want to do, was an ophthalmology rotation. And they sent me to the retinal blastoma clinic at the very famous clinic at Columbia. It was run by Dr. Ellsworth, Robert Ellsworth. So retinoblastoma is a devastating tumor that's found in newborns, and it grows very quickly. And in the old days, it led to blindness and an agonizing death for the baby or toddler. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, it looks exactly like another condition called Coates disease, which is a tumor, but it's not cancerous. And often the tumor will be not blocking the line of sight. The baby can actually see, but they look the same. And back then there was no CAT scan, there was no MRI, there was no imaging. So I show up on my first day of my rotation, and I'm with Dr. Ellsworth, and he tells this young couple in their 20s, your baby has tumors in both eyes. If it's retinoblastoma, we have to get both eyes out fast, and that might save your baby's life. But there's a 50-50 chance that it's not cancer, that it's this thing called Coates disease. But if we wait to see if it's retinoblastoma or Coates disease, if it is retinoblastoma, your baby will die blind and an agonizing death. I would watch these couples in their 20s drop to the floor screaming, and I got like lightheaded. I was like, ah. And then we would go to the next exam room and he would do it again. And there were people from the US, people from China, people from Switzerland who'd flown into the famous retinoblastoma clinic at Columbia. So I went home that night, I was stricken, and I said, we have to figure this out. We can't keep taking out babies' eyes if we don't even know it's cancer. So at that time, I had read an article about LDH, lactate dehydrogenase, that it's in almost all human tissues, and that they had recently figured out how to break it down into 5 isoenzymes. And I thought, well, I wonder if there's a particular isoenzyme pattern to the LDH of retinoblastoma patients. So maybe we could just get a little of their aqueous humor and run it and see what the pattern looks like. So Dr. Trokel helped me by giving me aqueous humor for my control from cataract patients. So I had aqueous humor from normal adults, aqueous humor from Coates patients, little babies who lucky enough had Coates, and aqueous humor from retinoblastoma patients. And I started to do the research at Columbia. All sorts of craziness ensued. I ended up having to do the laboratory work at Lenox Hill Hospital, where I had been accepted to be an intern in the next year. To make a long story short, there is a definitive pattern to the LDH isoenzymes of retinoblastoma. And it was used as a diagnostic test for years. So they would gas out the babies for a few minutes, like 3 minutes, do a little AC tap, take less than a milliliter, and there was an absolute certainty that you were dealing with cancer or not. Mm-hmm. So it saved countless babies from having their eyes removed.
That's an awesome story. I mean, you know, it's great. You have this, on one hand, 75 million people have now taken advantage of laser vision correction, and, you know, a much, much smaller number, but still maybe even more important, saving their sight where possible. It's a great story. Now, your husband, Steve Kleiss, is a PhD, and you two have collaborated. You've traveled together and lectured together, but that's kind of a neat relationship. Share a story with us about something you two have done together in the field.
Well, he was an integral part of the excimer laser team, as you will recall. I can proudly say, he's the world's greatest living corneal physiologist, and corneal physiology was an important aspect. The healing, how much temperature we could use in the cornea before we got thermal damage. I mean, he was a very, very important part of that team from the beginning, even with the animals. He was also a big part of the epikeratofakia team. And only doctors of a certain age will remember epikeratofakia, the living contact lens that preceded excimer. Actually, RK and epikeratofakia were just passing out of utility when the excimer was increasing in popularity. But the living contact lens procedure, where we took cadaver human corneas, processed them, spun them in a centrifuge to reduce their corneal hydration to normal. We would then freeze them, and while they were frozen, we would carve a prescription in them. And we would then freeze dry them and ship them to doctors. So they would get a little contact lens bottle. Inside was this little green, we dyed them lissamine green, little green chip. They would pour water on it, it would fluff up, and they would sew it on the front of the cornea after removing the epithelium. And we developed it for myopia, myopic astigmatism, hyperopia, aphakia. This is back when IOLs were causing UGG syndrome, and it was very controversial to put an IOL in, even for aphakia. So, and keratoconus and patch grafts. I was doing that work before excimer. So I was a very, very, very young doctor flying around the world. We taught over 700 surgeons in the US and around the world how to do this. And the results were great, except in an adult, it took 6 weeks for the tissue to clear. And along came other technologies like RK and excimer, where you got a better result. Well, you got a great result faster. So you got a great result. The babies cleared like that. So it was great for pediatric aphakia. The babies cleared super fast, but adults, it took 6 weeks. And, it just was replaced by other technologies.
Sure.
But it taught me a whole lot about clinical trials and appearing before the FDA and all of that good stuff.
Well, it's been, again, 25 years, 25th anniversary since the approval of the laser. And you are a pioneer of the leading elective surgical procedure in the world, because there's nothing else that's been done 75 million times out there in the aesthetic space that we're aware of, or anything else that's considered elective. Let's look out the next 10 to 20 years. What do you see emerging? Is LASIK going away? Is it going to be replaced by anything, or is it going to continue to be a mainstream? And what else do you see coming on that gets you excited as you look at the body of research going on today?
There will be several coexisting technologies. LASIK will get even better, amazingly enough. Topo-based procedures are okay. They're not perfect yet still, even after all this time. They're certainly helpful for highly aberrated eyes. But, there's a little ways to go in translating topo-guided to normal eyes, as opposed to highly aberrated, but amazing for highly aberrated eyes. SMILE will continue to improve. Refractive indexing, I'm very excited about. It's still way up the pipeline, but the ability to change the refractive index of both the lens and or the cornea is incredible. Scott McCrae and his group are doing a lot of that great work. As Yogi Berra once famously said, the future lies ahead, but the future is incredibly bright and getting better all the time.
And, the work that you and ophthalmologists and researchers around the world are doing to allow people to simply wake up and see without glasses, or allow them to see, period, is amazing. It's what attracted me to the field now many, many years ago when you and I first started collaborating. And I talk to people all the time, particularly in industry, who may start in ophthalmology and then they go somewhere else and they tend to come back because there is something special about this particular sensory organ that we have. So it's been just incredible. Well, Marguerite, thank you. I appreciate you spending some time with us. I know your schedule is incredibly busy, and we just look forward to hearing more about you and the work that you're doing in the months and years to come. And with that, I'll thank everybody for listening and watching this episode. Tune in at pxmovement.com for other episodes of PX Talk. I want to thank Dr. McDonald for being with us today. And until next time, I'm Sharif Madavi. Goodbye.